Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Wellness Blueprints. I'm Jess. I'm so glad you're here to nourish your roots with me. So, today I want to talk a little bit about uh, is it ADHD or is it trauma? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody that their ADHD doesn't exist, that your neurodivergent brain is not a thing, because that's not what I'm about. I have undiagnosed ADHD. I have a neurospicy brain, and I've been living with it my whole life. So it absolutely is valid and is definitely a thing. But what I'm finding more and more, and I'm experiencing this myself, as we start to work through different traumas that we may have experienced throughout our lives and throughout childhood. And everybody has some amount of trauma. I know I've said this before. Trauma is subjective. So what one person's trauma is not going to be a trauma for somebody else, and vice versa. Some people have much more traumatizing experiences, if you will, than others. But really, what it comes down to is the effect that it has on the body, on the stress of the body. And if it's affecting the body in this way, the same way as this person over here, well, then you've experienced some trauma there. So the more that people, myself included, work through different traumas and start to work through what's been going on, the ADHD symptoms start to decrease somewhat. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this because there are similarities, there are small amounts of connections. I personally believe that we can have, and most of us do, have a little bit of both of those things that are contributing to all of the symptoms that we are just assigning to the ADHD or whatever other neurodivergent diagnosis you might have. Okay. So when we experience a trauma, especially as a child, it affects the neuroplasticity of the brain, which is, the development of the brain and how it's being wired, basically. So when you experience a trauma, that's going to have a negative effect on the prefrontal cortex. And then every time that you rethink it, relive it, have an obtrusive thought about that occurrence, it damages it a little bit more. And it's also going to have an effect, a negative effect on the amygdala in your brain, which is, your emotional control center of the brain. So the cool thing is that you are able to rewire this and change the neuroplasticity of your brain, even as an adult, as you start to work through some of these different things. So that these traumatic experiences stop causing you to repeat patterns in your life that are not serving you. Okay. We develop different patterns, different mechanisms to protect ourselves from further harm. You can kind of think of it like if you ever watched a scary movie and it like really left you not feeling very well, you were freaked out and just in a bad mood afterwards, and you don't want to watch that anymore. I know there's a couple of movies that, I mean, even not even just horror movies. I mean, like the movie Castaway. I went to see that in the theater when it came out, and I walked away from that. And I mean, it was a good movie. I'm not saying it wasn't a good movie, but I walked away from that and I was like, I don't like how that movie made me feel inside, and I'm not watching it again. So, it created a feeling inside of me that I didn't like, and I don't want to feel it again. So I'm like, I'm just not going to watch that again. And there's certain types of horror movies and stuff I used to watch when I was younger, get a thrill out of it. And now I'm just like, you know what? I just don't like the state that it leaves me in. So I'm not going to watch that anymore. So, that's kind of like on a smaller scale. Of course, for like a small child, if they were to see like a scary horror movie, that could be a little bit more of a permanent trauma, maybe not permanent, but a longer lasting trauma. Okay. So there's, lots of different ways that trauma manifests in the body, from anxiety and depression to, physical symptoms like high blood pressure and high heart rate and even like rashes and shivering and tremoring and things like that over time. And that's when it starts to get a little bit more extreme. But, lots of anxiety, depression, especially when you have hyper arousal around things, like you're just constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You feel like there's always imminent danger, and you're always ready for that danger. You're just like constantly prepared for everything because you're just waiting for, like, this horrible thing to occur. And I feel like some of this can even be generational as well. It's passed down, or maybe you're remembering it from a time previously when you were here, just because, there are things that have happened to our family members before we were here that, of course, they're going to pass that trauma down to us. So, it's not always all necessarily something that occurred while you were younger. But let's talk a little bit about this. So I kind of started asking myself this question, throughout my life, have I been masking because of ADHD, which maybe a lot of it is that, or maybe there's some other folks out there I see who have ADHD, where they have some autism symptoms and ADHD kind of like merged together, and so it could very well be this and be very connected to the neurodivergent brain, because these things are absolutely valid, and I can speak from experience on that. But maybe it was also not safe to be myself. Was it not safe to be you at some point in your life? Maybe it was in school when, you were being your silly self that you were at home, and then people looked at you funny and made fun of you. And then you go, okay, well, I have to behave a certain way so that I can be accepted. And, we kind of change our behavior depending on who we're around anyway. I mean, that's kind of it's part of fitting into society, but sometimes it can be taken to a next level. I mean, for example, like like I curse like a sailor most of the time, and I really don't care what people think as far as that goes. But when I'm around my mother-in-law, I watch my mouth. Because she would just be, oh my goodness. So, I behave myself when I'm around her, sort of thing. So, everybody, there's certain times, like, if you have to go into court for a parking ticket, that's not a good time to be dropping the F-bomb. I don't think the judge is going to like that. So, there are times where, like, even though you're feeling a certain way or you want to speak a certain way, you're going to kind of put a mask on, because that's just how you're supposed to behave. And that's just part of being in a society, and, not just being like this completely feral person all the time. I think I'm probably like 80% feral or something like that, right? So, so there is some amount of masking that people do just, out of necessity, just to be here. And, and other people don't. But sometimes, like I said, it would be advisable, right? So, but there are times when, okay, well, I'm masking because it wasn't safe to be me. So now I need to put out this other personality that people might be more accepting of. Okay. And then, uh, you know, sometimes, especially if you do have ADHD, or you did as a child, whether you were diagnosed or not. I mean, I went to school in the 80s and 90s. I don't think I knew a single girl that was diagnosed with it. As I remember, as I was getting a little bit older, there were more kids, like in my brother and sister's grades. They were a little bit younger than me, that they were being diagnosed, but it was mostly boys, because girls would internalize their hyperactivity. And, so there was just different ways. And I mean, isn't that just the case with everything? I mean, they pretty much study almost everything under the sun only on men or boys. And then girls just kind of get the shit end of the stick, like, oh, well, this doesn't affect you. You're not fitting this criteria. So, that's like, that's like a podcast for a different day, right? But so when you have these diagnoses, often, whether you have the diagnosis or not, honestly, I'm going to say that right there, the kids could be getting in trouble more often. And it's not that they're like misbehaving on purpose, or misbehaving because like they want to, but they often will get into trouble. They'll get in trouble at school. They might get in trouble with the law. They're going to get in trouble at home. Maybe they're going to get disciplined at home. And so, then the trauma can occur because of the impulsivity, just the hyperactivity, what people are just deciding is misbehaving, when really, I mean, maybe they need more attention, they need more of an outlet, they need more of a creative outlet. Their brain doesn't work the same way as all these other kids in the class. So you're telling them all of this, and it's just making their brain go, what. So, because especially in schools, and now it's a little bit different in schools because you can get different IEPs and things like that. And so kids are getting a lot better attention catered to what their actual needs are. But I know when I was in school, there wasn't a whole lot of that. I mean, maybe on some levels, because there maybe on some levels, but certainly not like it is now. So you were just kind of expected to like fit in to, like fit, like you would be a square peg trying to go into a round hole, but everybody else fit into the round hole, and so nobody could understand why you weren't fitting. So then they go, oh well, there's something wrong with you, and this kid's in trouble all the time, and he's a troublemaker. And then you have this like persona. Okay, well, I'm in trouble all the time. I'm a misfit. I'm always bad. I do all this stuff, and then you even may start to believe those things about yourself. So a lot of the time, I kind of look at some of these things now, and as I've worked through things, I mean, I've always had like a thing with like wanting to control every situation around me. And I kind of look at it like, have you ever heard about? I know I've seen like a meme going around where like, grandma says, oh, in my day, nobody had autism. Nobody had like that. None of that existed. And we go, okay, grandma. And like, she has like these like fancy plates on the walls and like things out on her tables. And like, you're not allowed to touch them or breathe on them or go near them. And they have to be perfect at all times. And so they're just kind of like, okay, I mean, the neurodivergent brain was always there. But when you lack control over a lot of areas of your life, you will try to gain control over anything that you can to try and compensate for that. So, I mean, for me, I didn't have a lot of control over what I was able to do after high school. It was like join the army or go to college. And honestly, neither one of those sounded very exciting to me. Um, but, so there was a lot of that, um, maybe you had desires growing up that you were never able to get for whatever the reason is, and we don't need to get into that, doesn't really matter, but all of these different areas where you felt like somebody else was always in control, telling you, you have to do this, you have to behave this way, you have to do it like this. If you don't, you're bad. You can't step out of line with this. We expect this, this, and this out of you. And expectations always lead to resentment because I mean that's BS. Like you can't just if you're expecting something specific out of a person, out of a thing, out of like an outcome of anything, you're going to end up with resentment. So you have to kind of let go of those expectations. But when people have expectations of you and then you don't come through because you're a human being, and you can't always get straight A's on everything or whatever, whatever the case is, there's going to be resentment kind of developing on both sides there. Like how come you can't do better? And oh my gosh, why can't I do better? Why are they so mean to me? Why do they expect so much out of me? So, we lack control of our lives. And then that spills over into our health. It spills over into our wealth, where you just kind of feel like I mean, you could have a lot of money, but you feel like you're not in control of it. You feel like you can't spend it on this and that because you're afraid that it's not safe with you. There are all these different ways that this will just completely spill over into your life when you feel like you don't have any control over certain things. So then you try to control other things, like nobody touched the plates that I have on the wall. Why did somebody move my thing? Why is that, so you just try, I'm like, oh well, you can only eat these things, kids, you can only do this. This is the only way to live. And then you can really start to go second level with it and start to insist that everybody always agree with whatever opinion you have. And so, as we work through different traumas and start to let go of some of these things, because these were made as it was a coping mechanism. It was something because you needed to feel like you were in control, and so you went for whatever aspect you could grab onto to grab that control. And so as you work through these things, you can start to let go of that and know that you'll be taken care of. And this especially goes in with your health. Because when we experience this trauma, like I said, you're going to have these things going on in your brain with the neuroplasticity of your brain, but it's also going to affect the rest of your body. It's going to affect all of your organs and tissues and cells and go through your fascia, and it's going to leach calcium out of your bones and deposit it in other places. So places will be calcified that are not supposed to be, and you're going to have the the calcium coming out of your bones. So then your bones get more brittle and it can lead to things like osteoporosis. So physical things happen as a result of these things. And, so I'm noticing that, when we have these toxic levels of stress, that as you're perceiving them, they're getting trapped into the body in these ways. And then they're really just amplifying the symptoms that we would associate with ADHD, like the brain fog, walking into a room and forgetting why the hell you're in there, not remembering to switch the laundry all the time, and like constantly using more detergent than any human elsewhere would use because you have to rewash your laundry 3, 4 times a week. Because you're like, oh, I swear I switched it before I went to bed. And then you didn't. When you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh crap, like now my laundry's got the funk again. So your anxiety, the nervousness, and you can notice that these things will start to increase. I think it's kind of only just natural and par for the course. When you have babies, your anxiety is going to naturally increase because now you are responsible for their lives, and it's like your heart is like literally walking around outside of your body and you're chasing it like, my heart needs to be okay. So these things naturally increase. But depending on how much trauma that you have experienced in your life, and again, it's subjective. So, whenever you read things about this online, it's talking about, like major car accident, death, illness, abuse, neglect, those kinds of like major, major things. And yes, that is the case for a lot of people. But sometimes we don't realize that something was traumatic to us even many years later, because it was something that you kind of think, oh, well, that's, it's not really a big deal. But it doesn't matter what matters is what the effect it has had on your body and what effect it's having on your day-to-day life. So if you're experiencing a lot of things like you just lack focus and everything, these are things that trauma can also contribute to. So as we work through those, I know I'm noticing, and I'm talking to other people and they're like, yeah, I don't really have those symptoms very much anymore because I've gotten myself to a place where I've worked through some of those core traumas, and it's no longer an issue that comes up for me on the daily. We're probably always, you're going to have your days where you're just kind of feeling brain foggy, and some normal amounts of anxiety and depression are normal. Anxiety and depression are both clinical diagnoses, but they are also both just normal emotions that human beings feel on a regular basis based on what's going on in their lives. And it's a feeling that you can feel and acknowledge, and it serves you at the time because, if you're feeling depressed about something and it's totally valid, sure. But it's when they become more chronic, and that's when you get into that chronic level of stress because you're living in such chronic stress all the time. So maybe you grew up in a house where your parents had no emotional regulation. So they didn't teach you how to regulate your emotions. And then, so then you're going through life not understanding how, like, some people can remain calm. I used to have a little sign on my wall. It said, if you can remain calm, you just don't have all of the facts. And, now I kind of think about that and I'm like, well, even if you have all of the facts, there's always a way to remain calm because we don't have to allow those things to affect us in a certain way. There's lots and lots of crazy shit going on in our world right now. And, I'm not going to get into sides on who's right or wrong because, quite frankly, I don't think anybody's necessarily one way or the other. There's always a neutral position that you can take in literally anything. You don't need to just look at everything as black, white, wrong, right. So there's always a space that you can find in the middle. And that is where that calm occurs. That is where we can stay calm during a situation that could set you off the deep end. So, as we work through this, it actually rewires your brain and changes that neuroplasticity. So, it's like you're rebirthing your brain. So you're transitioning your physical body in addition to your spiritual body. And that's what I'm talking about there with your spiritual body, your vital body, bliss body, your biofield, which, surrounds and permeates your body, goes out good 6 feet. That's what communicates with everything else. And that holds the blueprints for your physical body. And this is a perfect example of that. As you work through these traumas that are affecting your spiritual body, it's going to affect your physical brain, your physical body. Your heart rate is going to go back. Your HRV is going to be back at an optimal place. Your heart rate, your blood pressure, your digestion, because when we're not feeling safe, your autonomic nervous system's not feeling safe, and you're stuck in fight or flight, then your digestive system's not working. Like, all of your healing processes are put on pause. And it's not just fight or flight when you're stuck in that stress state. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You can kind of freeze up. Like maybe when someone would yell at you when you were a kid, and you just freeze up, and then you hold your breath. And then there's also fawning, which would be like following a mentor or something, and then just like kind of putting them up on a pedestal. And that shouldn't be the goal for any mentor. So, I know, like, for me, I don't want you to fawn over me. I want to help empower you so that you can harness control of your life with spiritual and physical wellness. But I don't want you to be holding me up on some sort of pedestal, because I'm just a spirit having a human experience just like you. And I'm just trying to navigate this human experience just like you. And I want to share the knowledge that I have so that hopefully you can have an easier time. But by no means should anybody be fawning over me. And that is, that's a fight or flight. That's a trauma response when you're in a stressed out state. So, early life traumas can leave you feeling just like there's always like a sense of fear, impending doom. There's something like there's always something to be scared of. And that kind of puts you, that kind of comes from a victim mindset. Because you feel like something's been done to you, so you're constantly afraid that someone's doing something to you. Or if you've ever met somebody who always thinks that someone else is out to get them, they say, "Oh, well, this person must not be being honest. Their word is not worth anything. They're going to screw us over. They're going to steal our money. Like, this is probably a scam. That's a scam, or they just always think like, oh, this other person must be a complete asshole, but completely unprovoked. Like, this person is given zero reason for someone to feel that way, but they're just always thinking that someone's out to get them, because they just constantly are feeling like they are being stuck. They're going to be a victim with everything going on. So, and then of course, not being able to plan things very well, not being able to pay attention. I know with like ADHD, we need a schedule so that we can get our tasks done, but we suck at schedules. Like, I can make a schedule. I can hyper focus on making out a schedule and be all pretty. And I'll follow it for like 3 days. And then I won't even know where the damn notebook is that I wrote it in. So, as you work through traumas, as you work through these things, whether you want to do a fantastic program like what I have, or if you feel like you need a therapist instead, I completely, or in addition to, I've worked with plenty of people who also see professional licensed therapists as well. Because I'm not trying to take the place of a therapist. I would never. But when you work through these things, you start to realize that, okay, well, I can pay attention a little bit better. I can focus a little bit better, because you're getting rid of some of these things that are just not serving you, these core traumas that have just been you've been carrying around and you didn't even know. And we come up with all of these different ways that we can deal with these things. So, as you're working through it, there's probably going to be some pretty crazy challenges that are going to come up, and it's going to make you feel like you're going backwards in what you're doing. And those things are happening so that you can it's kind of like so that you can solidify what you're doing. It's like, so that you can get through. I remember I mentioned that we will have patterns. We will do the same types of things over and over again that will lead us to the same types of results, kind of keeping you stuck in a cycle. And it's a trauma response. So as you work through these things, you might have something really big come up. And it's kind of like in a video game when you get to like the big boss at the end, you got to beat the boss, and then like you've won the game, you've saved the princess or whatever. But those things will come through to kind of like solidify and remind you how far you have come, so that, you're going to have a better chance of controlling your impulses, and not just like physical and verbal outbursts, but like impulse shopping and impulse signing up for this and that. That happens because we're chasing dopamine basically, but this is all connected. So when you have these traumas and you have these ADHD symptoms and you work on your mitochondria, bringing energy to the cells, and you work on your drainage funnel and making sure that everything is flowing so that you can get rid of physical toxins, and you're giving the body what it needs so that it can thrive instead of just survive. And you're working through these different aspects. You're making sure you're getting your sunlight, you're making sure you're sleeping well, and you're journaling, and you're breathing and meditating, and you're really trying to help out your body. You're going to notice that some of these symptoms that we attribute to ADHD are going to decrease and makes your life a lot easier to navigate. And that's not to say that you're not going to have things that come up that kind of bring those things back somewhat, because, you know, you're never totally done. So, like, okay, well, I beat the big boss on my traumas and now I don't have any more, no more traumas for me. That's not how this works. There's always going to be things that life is going to throw at you. And so, there's always going to be times where maybe you go on a vacation, or you are, whatever the case is, and you're kind of like eating all the things, and so you have like lots of cookies and cake, and maybe you're eating some things that are, you're not really paying attention to your protein, you're not getting your veggies in and stuff like that. So your gut microbiome was my point there. Your gut microbiome is going to be off. So then you're not going to be producing and transporting as many of your happy chemicals up to your brain. So that's going to have an effect on your memory and your brain fog. And it's going to have an effect on anxiety and depression, because if you don't have the happy chemicals in your brain, how are you supposed to feel happy? So there are different things in your environment that are going to have these symptoms fluctuate. Just like I said, anybody is going to have, days where they're foggy and brain fog, memory is kind of, we're all going to have those days. So, those things are always going to be normal. But this has been an amazing discovery. And as I look more and more into it, the two kind of, they don't really necessarily go together unless you're kind of talking about how having a neurodivergent brain puts you at a higher risk for behavior that can cause further trauma in your life. So, like, just like I said, with kids not behaving, or, or we have so much trauma going on, and you're constantly seeking dopamine. So you try to escape your body because it's so scary to be inside your head, or because your mind is always racing, and all your to-do list is there, but you have no desire, like you just cannot function to get moving on any of your to-do list. And so instead you will try to escape your body, and that might be with drugs or alcohol. It just puts you into that survival mode. So you're at a higher risk for those kinds of things. And then that's going to, drugs and alcohol and everything, you're going to create further trauma by using those things, because it's pretty much inevitable. You're either going to feel bad about it, or, eventually you're going to have something happen while you're under the influence that's going to stay in your head. So, so those two things they're very much connected in that manner. But a lot of the symptoms are overlapping, not entirely, but there are symptoms of trauma and ADHD that overlap, like anxiety and the brain fog, and those kinds of, your memory, those kinds of things do overlap. So it's really amazing when you figure out that working through some of these things makes certain tasks in your life seem easier to grab onto. And then, that releases some dopamine, and you're like, okay, I feel motivated to do more because I actually feel pretty good about myself today. Like I woke up this morning and I did and I didn't feel those things that I was feeling before, as a, like that, sometimes even just kind of like the voices in your head that tell you, well, you don't get anything done properly anyway, so what's the point of even trying? Um, and it can be a really difficult place to be in your life. And like I've always said, and so many of my colleagues have said, healing is never ever linear. So continue to do your walk, continue to learn more about your body so that you know how you can support your body, and learn more about things that are bothering you. Whether it's food, you can keep your food journals, you can keep journals for different experiences and triggers. You just write things down and then just kind of sit there and look at it, and things become very, very clear. And as you continue, you'll notice, you're doing okay with walking into a room and remembering why the hell you're there. You're doing okay with getting your tasks done. And not only are you okay with getting some tasks done, but you're also okay with the tasks that you don't get done, because you can look at other things and go, okay, well, the day was not completely wasted. I can give myself grace and and give myself credit for the things that I did do, and also understand that there's going to be days where you just need to rest. There are days we just need to rest, and this society doesn't like to allow for that. But there are days where it's okay to rest. Take those mental health days. Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. This was an exciting one. I hope I'm not too all over the place with everything. Like I said, I do have a neurospicy brain, so I'm kind of like here, there, and everywhere. I've got my notes here so that I can try and stay a little bit on task. Otherwise, I could just be off on a tangent all the live long day, because most of the stuff that I come on here to talk to you guys about, I could talk about all day long. If you would like to stay in touch, you can download my free resource guide. I would absolutely love you did that. It has so many free resources. It's got some affiliate links. It's got some great stuff in there. So you're going to go to jess.deeprootedwellnessid.com/resources. So thank you so much for joining me today on Wellness Blueprints. Please leave me a 5-star review, and I can't wait to have you back next time.